Hello, everyone. My name is Mistress Danielle Blunt. I am a dominatrix who has around 15 years of experience in the industry, and I have been having these conversations with other DOMs, sex workers, psychologists, and people who can provide some more information or insight into their kink lives. And I'm thrilled to be here today with Miss Amina. Miss Amina, I would love if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Miss Amina. I am a Findom, Femdom, fantasy orchestrator, game master. I've been doing this specifically I'm going into my fifth year. And before that, I was in sex work as an exotic dancer. So,
I would love to hear a little bit more about that transition from being an exotic dancer to a femdom findom. I feel like something I think a lot about when I think about my like history and transition into this kind of work is I found BDSM as a personal interest and then shortly after started doing sex work and exploring that in a professional capacity. And I'm always so something that I think a lot about in my history is that I come out of like an old guard dungeon place where they're training you, you earn your leathers, and just a very I feel like it's a very different experience than a lot of people who found it through sex work first, and something that I feel like is like a lot of my friends who came out of dungeons have a very different experience than I do, and like how they first approached their professional work. I felt like they were trained in like how to run a business, and I was just like kind of left like scrambling trying to figure it out and like trying to navigate client relationships. And I've always been really impressed with the strip club hustle, and like watch I love first of all I love going to strip clubs. I love watching women hustle is like one of my favorite things. It turns me on so much. Like anytime I have like a woman like care provider of any time, I'm like, yes, upsell me please, like sell me another dance. I love watching it, and I feel like it's such a conducive skill set, especially to your like niche set of expertise of findom. And I'm curious a little bit about how you maybe found some of your like femdom interests within the club, as well as that like specific hustle of like hustling in the strip club, and how that applies or doesn't to the work that you do today.
mhm. So it's interesting for me. The whole reason I even got into stripping, um, well, for one, I mean, I already had my handful of kinks, definitely an exhibitionist, which kind of have to be if you're going to be up there, dancing naked in front of everybody. Um, it, I was there for the love of, first of all, that just being an exhibitionist and kind of dancing around. I was like, oh, this is great. I get to just be naked and dance and make money. But I have always been I've always had this dominant personality about me. So even in the strip club, they tell you, give them the girlfriend experience, make them want you, make them feel like you're so super into them, and oh well, it's just, and I'm like for me, that's kind of what I didn't like. I could do, but me being like the dominant, personality, the boundaries, like peer pressure was never ever a thing for me. They're like, oh, you should. I'm like, no, no, I shouldn't. And I actually found that a lot of the people that I met in that environment, they actually really expected or respected me for that. They're like, wow. They're like, you're really different. They're like, what are you doing here? They're like, you're too smart to be. And I always hated that too. You're too smart to be here. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, I am literally manipulating you out of so much money. Like, yeah, I'm smart and this is exactly where I should be. Like, this is the easiest thing to do with my intelligence, Um, and it's so funny because, but again, that environment of the whole, make them believe that you're super into them, you know, give them that girlfriend experience. And then me with my boundaries, they love pushing the boundaries, right, in that world. So I was needing something where I had a little bit more control. And, you know, it wasn't until, it was actually, I think, my third year in the club where there was somebody, he was a client just waiting on somebody else. And we just got to chatting and he started telling me about his humiliation kinks. And I was like, oh, what? I'm like, that's so interesting. He's like, oh yeah, I love, you know, being humiliated and degraded. And I'm like, I don't know if I could ever do that. Like, I don't like being mean. I was like, really? I'm like, you really like that? And he was like, yeah. Oh yeah, it's great. And I'm like, I'm not sure. But then I realized just how much this kind of work aligned with who I was, like my personality, just not so much being mean, but demanding what you want for yourself, demanding, you know, that control, and those boundaries. And I don't know, I feel like when it came to the hustle itself, I want to say that I attribute a lot of my success there to luck and maybe to privilege. I guess I had this look about me that made them flock to me a lot more. And I guess I really did hook them. Like my hustle was actually kind of transcending the fantasy of, yeah, this is a strip club where, you know, the lines are blurred, you know, not to say that they actually are, but like when you're in there, it is kind of still like a fantasy world. And so, but I would talk to them like, and I've gotten so many times, oh my God, like you're a real person. I'm like, yeah, we all are. And they just, I don't know, they kept wanting to come back and just escape, but also still be grounded. I feel like a lot of the customers that I met there were the same who come to Femdom basically a lot of the times, or really any other kind of sex work. You know, they do want the escape from their own reality, but somebody still to like confide in and be vulnerable with.
Right. So it's like the, I always find it really interesting because, right, you can't, it's like this delicate balance and dance and like really like exquisite skill set of creating this fantasy space or even just like holding space where like this can be all that exists, this is all that matters. And it, for me, I love how when you talk about your work you talk about like transcending fantasy, because I think so much of it really like is this ability to hold space where you are monotasking and just all you are thinking about is watching me dance. All you are thinking about is being on your knees in front of me. All you are thinking about is how you're going to bring me pleasure. And I think for me and my work and some of what I'm hearing you talk about, like some of the hustle in the club that translates into your work is this ability to create this like altered space that is both fantasy and somehow integratable in a way with reality. Yeah, and I'd
Mm-hmm.
love to hear you talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah. So essentially letting them, you know, have that space to be vulnerable, to kind of escape their reality, but also just stay grounded with me. It's like, hey, this right here is real, but it's only this right here. It's only you and I, and the rest, like it's literally gone. We are in our own space. That's really what I like to create in my relationships, and that's really what's found me the most success is just us right here. It's not, and even in this space where it is dom sub, it's not just me and then you. It is us because, you know, I do believe, I think, as we all should, that dom and subs do come, you know, as equal parts, and there has to be a balance. So for me, just creating that space where you can get so lost just in this moment, in this reality, I think has not only fulfills me, right? Because I do like connecting on a more, you know, intellectual, psychological level, but, you know, it also kind of plays on the things in your brain, like the dopamine, right? The oxytocin, the feeling of connectedness that keeps you wanting more.
Yeah. I love that. And I love what you're talking about of like equal power. It's something I think a lot about in my play is that like I find it very uninteresting to like dominate someone who like moves through their whole life like a snivelly little worm, you know, like I feel like, you know, like I want and it's not to say that like I like the struggle, but I like someone surrendering their power to me and like offering it to me on a plow on like a platter. Like this is what I have and this is what I have to offer you, not like I have nothing and like I want to reduce someone down to nothing, not have them be nothing to start. And I think a lot about um monotasking in my work and talk about it a lot too, but I feel like in a DS scene, it's so often like I think part of what makes it so magical is that it's so often the only time when you are focusing on one thing. And it is act such a powerful act. It's like why worship is so powerful. Like when you go to church and like feel the sublime, like in order to encounter the sublime, I feel like you do have to be willing to like let go of all of the other things that are calling your attention. And I feel like Femdom so beautifully sets up a space for that, both where, you know, like you don't have to think because you're being told what to do. And I think this goes back to a little bit of what you were talking about, what people were so drawn to you in the strip club as an exotic dancer is that those boundaries were being eroticized, that, you know, your firmness, your ability to like ask for what you want or like tell people what to do is being eroticized. And I've had so many people tell me, so many submissives tell me like how comforting it is to be told, to know that they are able to please me because they're being told what to do. And all that they have to do is what I say to bring me pleasure. And I feel like it can be so overwhelming if your partner isn't communicating those things. And so I think like having really good boundaries and being able to communicate really both facilitates like a good like femdom BDSM experience or just like an interrelational one. And you're also talking a little bit about this and I loved how you were talking about it of, you know, it like the like adage like it takes two to tango, like, you know, so much of how I approach BDSM is relational in that like it's not going to look exactly the same person to person. It's like tailored to the specifics. And I think I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I think a lot of people feel like who are submissive feel like sharing some of their desires is somehow topping from the bottom. But I'm like, no, like you're just giving me information to like weaponize against you. And like I have the things that I like I have a leather fetish and like a boot fetish and a foot fetish, and like I would love to include those in just about any scene. And like I love like psychological domination, but like if, you know, if stockings are the specific thing that make you weak, like I am not I'm not I'm smart enough to like pick the right weapon, you know. Like I want to know, like hand me the gun. And yeah, so oh,
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel the exact same way. You know, it irritates me seeing the thing like, oh, well, isn't that just giving them what they want? Like, first of all, if your kink happens to align with mine, I have no problem directing that fantasy. I have no problem setting that scene because I know I'm gonna get off, you know, the same way you are. I think it's just so contradictory. You know, like you said, why not exploit your weakness? Why not use the exact same thing that makes you melt into this puddle that I can then use to do whatever I want? Like, why is it so bad to wield that weapon against you? You know, I feel like it would surprise a lot of people too. It just so happens that one of my kinks, you know, I am also a voyeur. I'm on both sides. I'm the exhibitionist and the voyeur. I like to watch and be watched. I don't know what it is. I really love watching and listening to a man come. I don't know when or where that happens, but I love it. And I will have my subs send videos of that, you know, and then just with the added thank you, Miss Amina. Oh, like the moans and just hearing, you know, that pleasure. I think maybe it's because, you know, a lot of like in the vanilla whatever spaces, it's considered like, I don't know, the right word, that the man is supposed to be silent. Like, no, I want to hear you. I want to hear that pleasure too. And so, you know, people get so surprised when I'm saying, yeah, I'm getting off to that video of you, you know, riding that dildo, milking yourself, you know, and hearing you moan and come and say thank you, Miss Amina. Like, that's super hot to me.
Yeah, I feel like that embodiment too is something like I feel like a lot of what we're talking about, like through this conversation, even just so far, is about vulnerability and that sharing that vulnerability and being able to see that. I'd say I'm less interested in seeing videos of men come, but mostly because I really like orgasm denial, like is something that I am really into. But I love hearing the like pathetic and desperate pleas up until that
Yeah.
point and like figuring out like how someone can make their orgasm to be like in my benefit. And so I think like there's also something that I think is really interesting about like making men film themselves in these very intimate and vulnerable ways that they don't typically see themselves in. You know, that I think that like we as women, you know, from like a young age are like thinking about how society is seeing us, are like learning how to take the perfect selfie with the perfect lighting. And like I have my ring light here. It looks like you do too, you know, like we're thinking about these things in a way that I really don't think men are. And I think that you know, whether it's through like feminization or not, um, you know, the chance to like, I also like really love to give lighting advice. I come from a photography and psychology background and love to give photography advice to my submissives because it's like, okay, like you want me to like, you know, I want to enjoy watching this too. So like you're gonna learn how to use lighting for me and
No.
like you're gonna like light that
I should
asshole
do that.
for me so that it makes it even more pleasurable for me. But I think like that act of kind of like objectification and like knowing that your dom is like right like I yeah sure I think like it can hit on a humiliation aspect of being so exposed and seen, but I think so much of humiliation is an internal experience and I can like reflect that back to you. So if right like if you feel humiliated sending me a video of you like jerking off and desperate and begging to come, that might be humiliating for you, but
Mm.
I I can't make that humiliating for you if it's not. Does that like, and I think
Right.
like it can also just be like an objectifying experience. It can be like a really beautiful, vulnerable experience that you get to share with your dom.
Yeah. I also actually really love the objectification aspect. You know, I know it's supposed to be. I honestly, it's probably only in the online like Twitter space where this is like taboo, but like I fantasize all the time about using my subs as sex dolls, like
Me
literally.
too. Okay,
And
we're
I've
gonna get
made
canceled from Femdom Twitter.
oh whatever. Listen, um, oh man, I'm pretty sure I have a handful now of clips, like how I'd fuck my sub, like free use fantasy. Ooh, I don't know if you're allowed to keep that one in, but man, I mean, ooh, it's, but again, it's not about, oh, you get to have sex with me. It's no, I'm using you specifically for my pleasure and nothing else. Like
I
if
did
you
not know we had
have,
this in common.
I mean, it's like if you have a nice dick, I'm
It should
gonna be like, wow,
any toy
fun.
should be used. I feel like that's what makes
Exactly.
like us, you know, right, like
The
both
most realistic
like
you can get.
yeah, any implement can be used as a, you know, for good or bad. It depends who's using it and how you're using it, and right, like
Yeah.
what you want to do with it. I love the objectification of turning someone into a human dildo is what I really like to call them. And like I have a few clips. I have a scene that I shot with Owen Gray, which was a little bit different than some of the stuff he is typically known for, where like I was like kind of like soft doming him and like really like taking my pleasure. And people really responded to the people who found me like really responded to that clip. And I have a few where I'm using men as human dildos. And I'm like, that's how I fuck in my personal life. Like, what are you talking? Like, again, like, why wouldn't I use this toy to aid towards my pleasure if that's what I want? And I feel like having been in the industry and been in kink scene, you know, like when I started out, that was like it was very taboo. like the only people that you would see doing any form of like penetrative anything were porn stars, some of who were kinky
Mm-hmm.
and some of who were performing dominance as part of their labor. And it was just like incredibly taboo. I feel like a lot of doms wouldn't talk about it, and you could just like kind of find out. But I feel like I've been really like heartened. It just like warms my soul to see more doms like taking their pleasure how they want to, rather than like being stuck to this like very confined role of like what they are told a dom is. I also have this clip, like a full nude domination clip. I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember what it's called, but it was just basically a subtweet to the doms who were giving other doms a hard time for like doing full nude work. And it's like, am I still dominant? Like, do you still feel submissive to me? Like, like these boots are all I need. I can be barefoot. Like, it doesn't matter what I'm wearing, or like,
Mm-hmm.
it's about how much access I want you to have to my body, not about
Yeah.
like what someone on Twitter is telling me will make me a dominant.
Yeah, it's so annoyingly ironic how they say, you can't do that. A Dom doesn't do that. Like, I'm sorry. I signed up for this because I thought a Dom was somebody who does what they want for their own pleasure. If I want to use your dick as a dildo for my pleasure, that's what I'm going to do. If I want to make you come 5 times in a row for my pleasure, that's what I'm going to do. Like this whole notion of, oh, well, doms shouldn't have pleasure in that. I don't understand the
So based in
psychology.
male fantasy, you know, that
It is
of like it's
exactly
so based in the male fantasy of the dom as inaccessible, and this like very limited
right.
fantasy of
Yeah.
like, right, like sure, like fully clothed woman naked male is like very erotic, like it
Yeah.
really like hits on that power dynamic and like
Mm-hmm.
puts you in your place like pretty quickly, but like it's just one fantasy, you know? There's so
Yeah.
much more breadth to sexuality and to what desire can be, that I find it really, like I don't want to be, I feel like we're limited so much in like our everyday life. Like, why would we be
Exactly.
limiting ourselves like this in the realm of fantasy?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I feel like I'm getting like a little bit of a glimpse into like your philosophy of femdom and findom, but I would love if you could elaborate a little bit more of like what your approach to that looks
Mm-hmm. So femdom, just I guess as a baseline in general, um, like I said, dom and sub coming to the table as equals, exploring how they align, how they can balance each other, and really best serve, you know, their mutual fantasy. They're just building this fantasy world where they can both escape to for a time, for whatever reasons. I'm a huge believer in using this as, like a cathartic type of release. Um, just exploring and breaking down, the societal norms, the patriarchal thing. For me, it honestly, a lot of it does go back to breaking down the patriarchal the obligations, really, that we're all kind of thrust into, um, because it hurts men just as much as women, and really any gender, really. um, it's so funny sometimes when, just kind of seeing the spectrum of that too, like how the patriarchy influences a lot of my subs, because it can range from, oh my gosh, like, I love my wife, is this okay? I'm like, it has nothing to do with like your marriage. Do you think that if you are kinky, it means that you're not a good husband or whatever? um there are extremes to it, and I just want to break down, hey, you know you don't have to be that alpha. You don't have to be, this huge. It's fine being subservient. It's totally fine, looking to a woman or other, person for your for that power exchange. It's totally fine to let go of all that, because it is exhausting for a lot of people. It's exhausting to have to put this thing on because it's what is expected of them. On the other side of that, basically, you know, not only the harms of patriarchy as it applies to these standards that are thrust upon everybody that not everybody can like meet, but the benefits, those who actually do benefit from that, which again, if you're giving more here, you're having to take less from here. So the redistribution of that power and of that wealth. Basically fair is fair. I don't I don't hate men by any means. I don't, obviously I very much disagree with, and many times am infuriated with the patriarchal system and how a lot of men really exploit it and take advantage. But I don't hate men. I just want to show them that, hey, you have been privileged with a lot, and that's not cool. And I'm here to show you exactly what we do deserve. I'm here to show you, you're not all that in a bag of chips just because you've been dealt this hand. Now that you realize that and you accept it, it's time to, actually exchange that power that you've either accumulated for yourself by whatever means or have handed to you. Whatever it is, it's time for that advantage to become my advantage.
I love that. I also would love to see your up and coming next clip called "You're Not All That" and a bag of chips.
Yes,
I feel like it could be a great clip name. But I feel like so much of BDSM, what is so exciting about it for me is that it makes power explicit in this way that we just kind of ignore and don't talk about. And especially if you move through the world with a lot of privilege in this like patriarchal society, you don't have to encounter. And I love what you talk about patriarchy like hurting men too. I think is something that is often overlooked, and I feel like is being talked about more now. And right, like going back to our conversation of like photographing yourself and like getting to be vulnerable, like getting to like desire and moan and like want to bring pleasure and like want to connect. There's this term called traditional male alexithymia, and alexithymia is the inability to express your emotion or like name a feeling. So like if I'm feeling in my body, like sad and upset and like a little shaky after something happens, some people don't have the ability to name that feeling, and there
Right.
is, I don't know if it's a diagnosis or just a label of traditional male alexithymia, where it is a product of patriarchy that men are not, so much so that there is like this label for men who just
Right.
can't feel their feelings. And I think, so much of what we do is facilitate these spaces for people to be vulnerable and get to explore their masculinity, get to explore their femininity in a way that is kind of foreclosed upon by society at large. And right, like it's like whether you are subverting power dynamics or like leaning deeply into pre-existing ones, I think the intentionality is what makes it so like rife with the potentiality for transformation and to like move outside of those constraints. It actually, when I first started doming, I was like really, really against the term play. I was just like, no, this is like serious. This is real shit. Like, and just like really snotty about it. But I feel like I wasn't understanding how, like, right, like how transformative play can be, and in general, of just like getting to embody something that you don't on a daily basis is a form of play. And it really like can just like rip you open so that you have to like, you can't conceptualize yourself in the same way. And right, like whether that uh brings you closer to your partner because you're now able to be vulnerable with them, or makes you realize that that partner isn't for you because you are so misaligned in so many ways, and it was just the person you thought that you were supposed to marry because you were supposed to be a provider and like all of these other things. I feel like I feel like the best thing we can do is learn about ourselves. And I think DS offers so many different avenues to do that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. Um, Basically, this notion of, yeah, supposed to do. And even, I would say that even with, the men who definitely do benefit from, you know, patriarchy and find this massive success and do what they are supposed to do, even being, building an empire, let's say, like, because there are plenty of men who do what they're supposed to do and they follow, it becomes overwhelming, right? Because again, it's not natural for everyone. It becomes super overwhelming. And I feel that when you have so much power, that's also why you hear it's very common for the CEOs, the huge lawyers, they're into some kinky, degrading shit. Um, Having that much power, I think, is so overwhelming for the people who are fortunate enough to find success, but still don't identify or align with themselves that super masculine role. And it's kind of a concept that I actually just put out called the boss's boss, which, and it also kind of goes back to like my Findom thing, where it really is about the power. I actually love, so I know I call all my sub like betas or whatever, but I do recognize that there are plenty of alphas, right, in their personal life. There are plenty of people who have climbed that ladder and have seen that massive success and have built these huge things for themselves. Good for you. But we know often that having all of that doesn't always mean that, you won't still bow. And I love more than anything in this world. I'm getting like a little bothered right now. Finding those men who are the alphas in their life. They are the boss men. They are the CEOs. They are the movers and shakers. When they come to me and they're like, I will lay all of this at your feet. Like, the bigger you are, the harder, literally the harder you fall. And that exchange, like nothing tops it. I absolutely love, and it's funny because like that's, I mean, essentially who my whale is. We've gone through, different fantasies or whatever, and I mean, it just keeps getting, deeper into that humiliation and degradation, and to him basically saying, I want to be like on the floor filthy, like
Worm,
these
love
people
it.
who
We
have
love a worm in this household.
all, yes, I'm like, oh. So basically, yeah, for me, Findom is not about the money. It is about the power, and the more power you have, and really any financial power is great, but I really am attracted. I do have an actual power fetish. If it's intellectual power, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've fantasized about. He's never gonna probably watch this. My favorite professor in college. He's like this dorky looking dude. Like, you see him on the street and you're like, oh, there's an old nerd. But the knowledge that he had in his field made him so much sexier. Oh my God. I was his research assistant for a little bit and I was like, but
I love
I
those real
mean,
power dynamics that like you can kind of play with in real life. And I feel like there's something I'm also like very turned on by expertise. Like it doesn't matter what it is in, like
yeah,
expertise will always be so hot. And I think there's something to it, like with like the top someone who's like an expert in their field, like just like rolling in the cash. I think there's something to like tie that into the conversation we were having about like vulnerability and alexithymia, to like use my word of the day. Um, there are so many studies that show that like the more that you move up in that traditional sense in like capitalist structures and like traditional like work dynamics, the less empathy that you have, because in order to be that successful often like relies on the exploitation of others. And like if you're aware of that and in touch with that, like you wouldn't really be able to do that. And I think that there is something there that feels really important about like keeping you in touch with your humanity. And I think something that like I have played a lot with in my like my style of femdom in Findom is like some of those people that like do hold those roles are like, you know, like CEOs, managing hedge funds, just like all of these different spaces. Like if I use the word alpha, I guess what you would call alpha, but we like I know that they're still on their knees for me.
Societal
But
alpha.
yeah, so, yeah. Or just like traditionally very successful in patriarchal society
Right.
is having them donate to sex worker organizations of my choice and like, you know, like six-figure donations, just like it's, you know, and like sometimes they feel that money and sometimes it's nothing to them, but like it means both the world to me to be able to like facilitate that as well
Mm.
as um you know that you know sex worker like organizing just like doesn't get funding like that often. And I think like it's one of the things that I do with my submissives is like dictate where their charitable giving goes in a way that like also brings me pleasure. So it's like, right, it's like I love how you were describing and like getting all worked up about like bringing someone down to like worm like status. I feel like is like a deeply cathartic experience that is so sexy. And I think like I love with playing with like a diverse range of people from like different income brackets, but I think something that I've been like exploring more and more in my style of domination is the like the role of money. Like I feel like I didn't really play with Findom for the first few years that I was doming. I feel like I didn't really have a good understanding of it coming out of like a lifestyle place and like this old guard training where like so many people on FetLife are like some money financial transaction like takes all of the like the realness out of it. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like that's the only thing that you can do to make sure that I leave this fantasy that we are like constructing together with tangibly more power than I entered
Mm.
into it. And I feel like the longer that I do this, the more interested I become in financial domination because it is that energetic exchange. And you know, like when someone is getting so worked up and sending to the point where it hurts, where they feel it, and that number is so different for everyone. And I
Mhm.
tell people, I'm like,
Mhm.
I want you to hurt for me. You know, like just like we were in a scene. I don't want to like give you like a light spanking that's just like,
Yeah.
ooh, cool. That's
Yeah.
it's so nice. You're like hardly rosy at all. You know, like everyone can take a different amount, of course, but like what's important to me is that you feel it and it has made like a tangible impact on your
Mm.
life because I think that's the only space that transformation can happen in of when you're moved. And of course, like that's not what everyone's interested in. And then like I'm not a good fit for you if you're not interested in like pushing yourself. But I
Right.
think like hearing you talk about like how excited it makes you really just like made me think of how necessary it is like for that push and like that risk of vulnerability.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, because it really is about the power. It's the fact that you've accumulated so much power and now I'm going to take that away from you. You know, it's like I said, not about the money literally, it's about what that money symbolizes. Money is power in this world. And if you can keep literally sending me your power, sending me until it hurts, I feel like that's the most real and erotic exchange.
I had this visual when you were talking about your professor of like how hot and bothered his like intellectual capacity made you, and I was like imagining you like sucking his brain with a straw, you know, just like because like it does like that like the like liquefying of your assets of your power and like channeling it and sending it to me. Like um I feel like most people who are watching this with the two of us will be somewhat interested in financial domination, but I also have a lot of people who aren't get more and more interested when they watch me like chat with other findoms because I do feel like right like for me, it's both about money and also money is power. Like, I think, like, I don't want to like overlook the fact that like you meaningfully benefiting my life
Right.
and like me not having to think about rent, me not having to think
Right.
about all of these different things is not also something that like I find erotic, but like there is something inherent in that like frenzied exchange of like moreness of like completeness where it's just like the more and more of desire and like allowing it to get into that state where like you feel so out of control and like you are like
Mhm.
losing your free will and like surrendering your power and made manifest. And I think I made this clip called the fetish, which was part of a project for this class that I was taking on the fetish, going through like anthropological uses of the fetish, Marx and Freud, and just like this like very like heavy theoretical class that was led by a sex worker friend of mine who is also an academic, and it was just this amazing thing. And for the final project, I made porn, of course, because like what else are you gonna do? But make your your peers watch your porn during the final project,
Yeah.
and it it was just I the video I'm gonna give a spoiler alert. The video culminates with me like fucking myself with a Louboutin, and like because I feel like the Louboutin is yeah, I'll send you a link. It is just like so much of the like manifestation of fetish in
Mhm.
so many different forms. This like
Oh yeah.
highly erotic object that is like very inaccessibly expensive that like signifies power in this like very concrete way. And I think there is something about that like $100 bills just like do the same thing to me. And I think yeah, it's money is a very powerful fetish object. I think is like my roundabout way of like getting to this
Yeah.
point of. And I think so many people foreclose upon it when they're playing with power because of the taboo of it. One of the sends that I was super excited to see your whale sending to you were the reimbursements for your wedding to a woman. And I was like, is this lesbian cuckolding? Like, what? Like, I was just so excited by it. First of all, like, that seems like a big stressor to like take off your plate. And also, like, the send, like, you could, I feel like also just from like a parasocial, like, watching your Twitter account, like my impression was very much the like relationality of your dynamic with your whale, that it was like something that you're doing together, that he is like funding this for you. And
Yeah.
I'm
Oh, me too.
curious a little bit about that, like
That's
what
my
that was
yes.
like was it having to do with lesbian cuckolding or more like female supremacy and like worship as part of your dynamic?
So, oh gosh. So, I think ironically, um, none of my big spenders actually came from any type of like Findom background. They didn't approach me after watching a Findom clip. It's always been, and for this my biggest whale, especially the one with the huge sens, um, has always just been this emphasis on female supremacy. And I try to let that philosophy of, hey, whatever your power is, that's what you're giving up to me. If it happens to be, if all of your power is in your money, then that's what you're sending to me. When he actually first approached, I think it was with, I don't remember if it was $500 or $1,000 as first tribute. And he introduced himself saying something along the lines of, I'm no fin sub, or I think you might be disappointed in me as a fin sub, but I really admire, your just what I've seen. Um, I remember somebody saying something along the lines of, I think it was Princess Mickey. I think she said something along the lines of like, your domination should come through in your clips. Like that's basically your marketing. I think Goddess Jada also said something similar. Like that's your marketing. Like that should show, that's where you flex your dominance and they get a little taste. And then everything after that, the actual interaction is where you're going to put that into effect, that's when you like, that's where you capture them and then you kind of move it along. For me, yeah, my biggest spenders never really came from any type of actual Findom stuff. It all came from like the female supremacy, and you're gonna, you're gonna bow down and you're gonna do what I say, and you're gonna give up control, however that looks. So yeah, from there, I just kind of kept pressing. I'm like, if you're gonna start off with $500, $1,000, like we're gonna start pulling on this thread and see where it
Yeah.
goes.
Where are you gonna go
It
from here?
actually,
Only uphill.
I tell you what, he basically at some point was begging me to claim more. He was like, just claim it, goddess, just whatever you want, it it really pretty quickly evolved to where like I don't even remember like the fetishes that he said he enjoyed in the first place. I think it had to do with like pegging or something. I don't even remember, because now he's a fin sub, right? And it basically, he's like, I'm your beta, you know you claim it, you got it. Female supremacy, like I bow down to you. It's basically just reclaiming my power, because again, this guy is pretty powerful, pretty successful. He's up here, he's been up here for quite a while, he's accumulated a lot for himself. And so he's like, I have all this power, do you want it? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And they started off with well, to me now, the like smallish, medium-ish sins. I've definitely gotten pretty desensitized.
I was gonna say, I feel like that must happen really quick. Like you get like a
I get a
five-figure send, and
spike.
you're like, yeah.
Let me tell you, it's so funny. Okay, so I remember the biggest send he had sent up to that time. It was $20,000 at one time on Wishtender, and I was at that time in a cafe by myself, just enjoying my whatever. I took a picture of my matcha and I put it on Twitter, and he sent like $25 towards that. And then I was like, oh, how nice, whatever I said, surprise me with more. And he sent $20,000 out of nowhere.
He surprised you.
He surprised me. I'm like, before that, I had posted it on there and I framed it as, this is your new goal. I found that with him specifically, and plenty other big spenders, when you give them a concrete goal, instead of just saying send more, if you give them a goal saying this is exactly what I want, you're going to work until you make it to this point, that is a much bigger motivator, way bigger, because they know, they're like, okay, that, and they can literally visualize it, they see it, and they're like, wow, yeah, I want to do that for you, instead of just more. There have been drains with him where we went on a shopping spree. I basically just like kept sending him like pictures of stuff that I wanted to order from Sephora, and he would send that, and we would just go and go and go. And that was really motivating for him, because he kept saying, ooh, what else? Ooh, what else? What else do you want? What else would make you happy? To the point where, yeah, I was basically like, okay, well, now it's a monthly thing. Now you're going to pay my rent. There's a gift for rent, pay for dinner, pay for a bottle of wine, pay for this and that, and all kinds of stuff, just visually there in front of him, telling him exactly what I want. And I framed it as, in our relationship too, like we are fulfilling our purposes. Everything was always us, we, because again, this is a relationship. It's literally, you are fulfilled by, giving me what I desire, by setting me up, by giving me my comfort. And
Yeah, I feel like I never understood the like, right? Like it's like when I say like you get nothing, like I am leaving you with nothing, is like such a sexy thing to hear. But like what I mean is like I am all that you need. Like this, like my attention is all that you need. It should be all that you crave, is bringing me pleasure, and like that is enough for you. And like without that, you are nothing, because you don't have the purpose. I feel like
right.
I'm one thing that you were talking about was how he wasn't a Findom client. And I found this in my work too. And I think because I don't like market myself just as a Findom, and I have been like over the last few years talking more and more about financial domination as an expression of a power dynamic, I feel
Mm.
like I don't get as many of the people approaching me who want to just like sit there and jerk off. Like I feel like Findom can be both an expression of DS dynamic as well as a lifestyle. And I feel like it is very different type of submissive who will approach you for those things, right? Like there's someone, right? Like I never got the types of submissive who like were writing reviews about me or like, like I only want to see you because you have the pair of boots that I want. It was always about being interested in like serving me, my intellect, like what I have like built. And like you're talking about this with your clips, like showing your power and interested in serving that. And I'm wondering as someone who like I feel like you market more than I do as more Findom. I'm curious, like some of the differences you see in, like I don't know. I feel like I've convinced so many people they're into financial domination versus like hooking the fin subs who had been paying other people just through the style of my domination and education. And it sounds like with this person too, like they must have known that it would have gotten your attention, like a $500 or $1,000 send, like out of the blue, like that's exciting, as is a $20,000 send. So there, there's enough there that he could get into it. He wasn't like having to work through too much to like unpack his desire to send a woman money. But I do think you're like so apt in like that hitting into the desire to serve a woman and whatever that means and play with power. And I'm would love to hear you talk a little bit more about some of that.
Yeah. So, again, like I said, he basically was just there for, this power exchange, this female supremacy, this, I'm an alpha during the day, but I want to be a beta, I want to give it all up. He actually said that, and I'm guessing that he approached saying that he wasn't like a fin sub because he said that he had kind of tried that before with other DOMs, but he says he tells me like, but you have like this understanding, the psychology of it that I haven't encountered before. And again, I think it goes back to because my focus isn't on financial domination specifically, it's on really femdom. It's on giving up your power, serving me for my pleasure. It's about, so, and the fact that I guess for him, his power was money. He was like, this is what I have. Here you go. This is me giving you my power. Um, is kind of just how that transforms and evolves until it became, again, less about the money and more about like the ruin too, about the hurting. He started falling in love with pushing a little bit more, pushing a little bit more. The thrill of I'm giving you all I can. Now it hurts. Now he loves the ruination aspect of it. The psychology of I have this, I've worked so hard for it, and now it's gone. And it's
And
all
that's
for you
suffering.
because you demanded
That's
it. Yeah.
right. That's suffering for a purpose too. I feel like
Right.
it's such a profound thing that can move you. And I feel like I'm I feel like also very similarly like interested in like my first and foremost interest is power exchange. It always has been like as long as I have been um exploring BDSM. I feel like getting into it, I was doing some like interesting things with power that like I wasn't super aware of, but like I loved like one of like my early root kinks was um getting people who had girlfriends to tell me they would fuck me and just like being like right over them and like right at the point where like they were about to cheat on their girlfriend and I'd be like, oh, like I wouldn't want you to cheat on your girlfriend, would I? And like I had no idea what I was doing, but like those are
I
all of my
love
earlier
that.
childhoods, like not childhood but like all of my earlier like sexual experiences. And like didn't I couldn't find BDSM because it wasn't about a fetish or a kink that I was interested in. It was always about power, and it wasn't
Power.
until um my friend heard this talk at a human sexuality class about BDSM, and he called me and he was like, "Hey, like I don't want to be disrespectful, but like the guy that you're fucking talks, and like it would be remiss of me not to say like you need to go here and like learn about this world." And so like that's how I found out about it. But like when I would Google like look for porn that I was interested in, it was like very vanilla porn that I would find, but there was like a power dynamic where like the woman was in control, but it like wasn't all of the like accoutrement of BDSM that I was interested in. It was very
Mhm.
much like, and like I feel like you're talking about it too, that like more and moreness, like bringing you into like this altered, dizzying state, like towards the edge, towards the abyss, and like I can like either push you over, I can like keep you dangling on the edge, I can pull you back, but like being able to have that control is what I find so erotic. And when someone is like surrendering that, and I think it goes back to like the beginning of our conversation where like it sounds like both of us are uninterested in playing with people who like are not in touch with their power generally, because then they don't have something to offer, like
Right.
whether it be like financial too. And like I think one example is like I have a submissive in tech who like does have a lot of financial privilege now, but like also something that she does for me that I find like equally as like erotic and as much an act of service is like she does a lot of web stuff for me and SEO stuff for me, and like really works on building my power outside of my necessity to keep her in my life, which is something that I find the most erotic. So like when your whale is sending you like $50,000, $20,000, like like it lessens your need for him, but like you're staying because you want to, because you're like
Yeah.
because you're in that relationship, and like you're talking about it in this way where like, well, I think it's true, it's true in like um any dynamic, like where like you're closer to being able to retire, but it's like that building of a relationship where like this is for us,
Mhm.
and it moves outside of that, right? Like the money is the only thing is what I'm trying to say, you know what I mean, like where like there
Right.
is something else,
Yeah.
it's a power exchange. And so something that she does for me is she will make me tutorials of everything she does for me that I don't know how to do, because in case our relationship ends, I want to be able to do it. And she doesn't want me to have to be reliant on her. And I think that that is one of the sexiest qualities that I have found in a submissive, because people will use their power even when they're submitting as a way to like maintain control over you, is like
Mhm.
I feel like a
Mhm.
really gross part of submission. And I think like some of the selflessness that comes with like those really big sends of like feeling it until you hurt, or like providing someone with a skill set where they do become less reliant on you, is like such a deeply devotional act of love that I really
Yeah.
appreciate. And I was just thinking of examples outside of like large sends that could be like really, really life changing.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. Like the huge sends, obviously, I put those to very good use. I've been able to achieve so much, financially, which I love. But again, I do become desensitized to it. It's actually insane. Like there was one time where he sent me $1,000, and I'm like, oh, that's it. Like, what is this? What am I supposed to do with
It's a
that?
small tribute humiliation. Fix it. You
Yeah, I was
forgot
like,
a zero.
I was like, ill. Yeah, but I'm actually the same way. It's like at the end of the day, it's like, okay, yeah, I have the money, but what else? What else can you give me? I've actually, for quite a while, there are, submissives who are like, oh, I'm into this, I can do that, I can do that. I'm like, okay, you know, I asked them in their introduction, what beyond this, beyond the money, beyond the play, can you give me? What kind of knowledge, expertise, um, you know, do you have? I have, so my own sub is in tech, so he helps me troubleshoot all kinds of stuff. I have, so my whale is oh, well, he's done a lot. Oh, but I asked him about investing. I'm like, what are you invested in? Obviously, because you're getting really good returns. Like, where should I put my money? So I asked him about all about that. There's a lawyer that I talk to every now and then in New York, and I can ask him about. So it's more about the resources, again, not just the power that you have financially, but the power, your knowledge, your expertise, your experience. What else can you serve me with? What else can you
Just like did all of the annotations in a law review article that I did and like formatted all of the like footnotes in this like 70-page paper. And I was like, that, like, like you saved me so much time. Like, I did not want to learn how to do blue book footnotes. And like, I think people overlook like how to actually be useful in. And I
Yeah.
feel like when you are interested in power dynamics and like lifestyle dynamics, like I feel like both of us are interested in like what can you actually do to contribute to my life? And for a lot of people, the answer is just finances. Um, and other people can be more useful in other ways. I'm curious, like when you where you were in your career as a dom when your whale approached you, and how like that type of like that like $20,000 the first $20,000 because we know it lands differently the second and third time. But like how that like kind of if it changed how like how you move through the world, because I feel like part of this conversation that feels really important to me and that I think that we're really talking about is that exchange of power, right? Not like yes it is about your money, but the money is so important because it is a conduit for this power, which meaningfully changes how I move through the world. Like $20,000, you could pay off student loans, like, like some of your bigger tributes, you can like put the down payment on a house. Like those are like very big things. And I'm thinking of this also, this wasn't Findom, but like I had a submissive who like paid me for like my time and attention for a year up front, and just like being able to have that changed how I moved through the world and like what I could say no to in a way that made me feel so much more powerful, being able and like how like I had so much more agency to say no to things. And I'm curious about your relationship to that with some of the bigger sends that you've received.
Yeah. So the biggest sends, I mean, when they started to just like, and when it started to become a normal thing, it was actually a little over a year ago. Up to that point, he had served me for a year, but the sends were, I don't know, the drains were like 2, 3,000, 4,000, maybe max at a time. That first big one really kind of opened my eyes to being like, oh shit, first of all, I am so powerful because I facilitated that. I'm the one who made that happen. So it's possible it does exist, and I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to keep doing that, until I reach all of my goals. And I'm going to make it a priority also for him to reach these goals with me because, again, it's us. And that was a motivating factor for him and me. But just the fact that, like you said, being able to say no to things, I'll tell you what, it kind of has been a blessing and a curse, because a lot of the times when I am having like these huge months, I often say no to things that I actually should be doing. So I mean, not that taking rest is a bad thing, but um I feel like there have been a couple times where he's spoiled me to the point where I'm like, oh well, I guess I just won't put out clips this week, and I'll just, I'll just have fun in my, because everything is paid for, because I literally do not need anything. Um, but now, just knowing that, I don't know, that I have attracted through my own power, through my own confidence, and through my own, competence, I have attracted and, built more of this infrastructure for myself, knowing what is possible, knowing what can be done. Um, I mean, my relationship with men has changed, like for the better. Um, it's, just the confidence in knowing just how powerful I am, and in knowing that no matter what I do, and I, obviously I have used that money to support myself, I mean, I've been investing, I paid off all of my debts, my car, everything, the future moves that I'll be making. But now just, I don't know, I feel like all around has been transformative, just basically believing that
so much of like clips as a manifestation too, but I also think it's like such a gift to be like, I am so good, I don't even have to think about working for the next 2 weeks, like is such a gift, especially like right like in this like patriarchal like capitalist society, like being able to like be to give someone the freedom from thinking about that is such a beautiful, such a really like beautiful thing. And one of the sends that I was super excited to see your whale sending to you were the reimbursements for your wedding to a woman. And I was like, is this lesbian cuckolding? Like, what? Like, I was just so excited by it. First of all, like, that seems like a big stressor to like take off your plate. And also, like, the send, like, you could, I feel like also just from like a parasocial, like, watching your Twitter account, like my impression was very much the like relationality of your dynamic with your whale, that it was like something that you're doing together, that he is like funding this for you. And I'm curious a little bit about that, like what that was like was it having to do with lesbian cuckolding or more like female supremacy and like worship as part of your dynamic?
Right. So the thing about lesbian cuckolding is, number one, I'm not a lesbian. I am bisexual, but I do like playing with the fact that, and I made a clip about it. It was like, I get more pussy than you, which I think is hilarious. Um, but no, it actually surprisingly had nothing to do with that. I'll tell you what, I get like mixed kind of reactions or like answers or whatever when I do ask about cuckolding. It's not a huge fetish of mine, but I've learned that a lot of them actually don't care about the gender of the partner. Some people want it to be another man because they want to be like humiliated, like, oh, he's the real man and I could never. But when it comes to lesbian cuckolding or just cuckolding with another woman, it's more just about the pleasure of two women, and that's mainly what it was about for my whale, for not at all the cuckolding aspect, but the fact that it was another woman, so like double the power, double the female supremacy. Like, you two are so powerful, I would love for you to spoil her with what I'm spoiling you with, and so
Trickle
let's
down
see,
economics, right?
the wedding itself, uh it was north of 50,000 plus the rings. So he actually reimbursed both of the rings. So that's 10,000 each. 10,000 each for our rings. So I mean, who's counting? Whatever. But for that was actually super nice, because going back to what we said about like being set up, with all these big sends, I had actually already saved up the entire, all of the expenses for the wedding. So when I'm paying for that, it's coming straight out of the money I already had. There was no debt at all after this wedding. And then he paid me. So I actually profited off of my wedding, which was amazing.
Not
And yeah,
something many people can say.
I don't even know. I think I might have gotten the idea, like, why don't you have them, for the wedding? And at first I was a little bit hesitant because I was like, oh, would he go for that? But then, the whole thing about, not even wanting to be like humiliated by this relationship or like insert himself anywhere. It was the fact that literally he just wanted to send the power where it belonged, to two superior women. So that was
It seems
incredible.
like too such a good way. I feel like what I've found about like people I convince are into financial domination rather than fin subs approaching who are just like jerking off and like want to send and then will disappear for like 3 months until they're like ready to play again, is like being able, it's like such a gift to be able to share in those more intimate personal aspects of your life that other people don't have access to as well, and like getting to see like what the money is going to, and like
Right.
knowing how much it means to you, I
Right.
feel like has a different impact on people who aren't just fetishists but are actually
Right.
interested in how their power transferring to you is meaningfully impacting your life.
Exactly.
And it seems like a
Yeah, that's
fun, like a
actually,
very fun way to play with that.
yeah, that was actually also a huge motivator for him too in our relationship, which I mean, I'm just giving the recipe right here, making it, that intimate, making it feel like we are in this together. You are directly contributing to our mutual fulfillment, our purpose together. Um, so yeah, just that even more special feeling, like exclusive peek into my intimate life, being a part of this, from the wedding rings to, even, I mean, he paid for these too, which again, paid didn't he didn't pay for these, he reimbursed me, because again, I saved up the money and then he paid, so I profited. So these, yeah, but literally,
But you have to keep
just
receipts. I was thinking of a job
yeah,
I had in production where we'd give receipts for reimbursement, and they're like,
yeah,
"Wait, this
exactly,
receipt doesn't add up." But no, but like that's amazing because it's also like
yeah,
it is. I feel like some of what I see in Findom, I don't have anything like negative to say about it. Just like it's not so much my style. I'm actually like writing. I'm about to publish a blog post about like different types of financial domination and like what is the difference between like the fetish of financial domination, which like often really is just a fetish. Like you jerk off, you're done with it. It's not part of your life. It's not like part of your um it's maybe part of your sexuality and like your interests, but it is not part of like a submissive identity necessarily. And I feel like it is so different when it is. And I feel like it can be like so much more meaningful and like really building like a really intense and profound connection and relationship when someone is that committed to transferring their power to you in a
mhm,
way where I want to say like this is something that I think a lot about in my style of financial domination, that I've had people like transfer power to me in a way that makes them less relevant to me, but still like that like conceptually would make them less relevant to me. But that's not what happens with continued devotion. You know what I mean? Like the benchmarks might change of like, right, like you take like ten lashes from like I'm spanking you and you like take like 10 hits. Like maybe if we want to like keep pushing, you might be taking more and more, and it might take more for you to feel something, it might take more for me to feel something, but I feel like that transfer of power where
yeah,
I don't need to be reliant on you, and yet like I am still intrigued and interested in the DS dynamic and the DS relationship that we are cultivating through
mhm,
that like continual act of surrender and devotion, and like that continual act of like what like I know everyone's into different things, but like of like degradation and further abasement. Like there is always further that you can go if you are interested in like moving in that space of like intensity, which has also always been like one of my interests of like different plateaus of intensity and like how far can we go together.
mhm, yeah, yeah. That's interesting that you say about the different like intensity, because I kind of like to play with that too. It's either the 20,000 all at once or 20,000 over a period of time. Like that's fun to play with too. But yeah, it all goes back to like the devotion, like you said, and I definitely see. I don't see Findom and Femdom as two separate things. I use Findom as a tool for Femdom. It's to me it's one and the same.
Yeah, I think that was why I was so excited to have this conversation with you, because I feel like our approach to femdom and findom is very, very related, each with our like different approaches. But I think like that at the core, I see less people doing. And I'm always excited to chat with people about like what their practices are. And I feel like we could just like keep chatting forever, but maybe we'll have to just means we'll have to do a part two. But I would love if you could share where people could find you and could find some of those great clips that you were mentioning.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm on Twitter at yes Miss Amina. Um, I guess my biggest and most updated clip store is going to be iwantmissamina.com. That's the I Want Clip store. And then my fan club, aminafans.com, for
Amazing.
like
And
actual like kinky interaction.
yeah, I feel like that's so overlooked too. I feel like I would love to chat with you about that of like how like moving beyond fantasy too of like just passively watching someone's clips, you get to have this like personal interaction is always what's been the most fulfilling for me. And like when making clips, I'm just
And
like
lucrative.
yeah, totally. Like this is marketing and like hopefully someone will fall into my web that I can like connect with because I'm so interested in those
Exactly.
connections. But if anyone wants to find me, you can find me at bluntlinks.com, and that's where everything is because social media is nebulous and always being deleted. So I will just share that. Um, okay, well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.